Hello fans of The Shack. Now, I didn't finish last time, ages ago. I didn't finish chapter 11, so I'm going to finish that off and then hopefully read chapter 12. So Mackenzie has been in a cavern meeting wisdom and learning some things about judgment and how hard it is to be the judge, but how we want God to be the judge in the right and wrongs as we see it. The quiet of the cavern was suddenly broken by the sound of children's laughter. It seemed to be coming through one of the walls, which Matt could now clearly see as the room continued to brighten. As he stared in that direction, the stone surface grew increasingly translucent and daylight filtered into the cave. Startled, Mac peered through the haze excuse me, and finally could make out the vague shapes of children playing in the distance. "Those sound like my kids," Mac exclaimed, his mouth open in astonishment. Moving to the wall, the mist parted like someone had drawn a curtain, and he was unexpectedly looking out across a meadow, back toward the lake. In front of him loomed the backdrop of high, snow-covered mountains, perfect in their majesty, dressed in heavily wooded forests. And nestled at their feet, he could clearly see the shack where he knew Papa and Sarayu would be waiting for him. A large stream tumbled out of nowhere, directly in front of him, and flowed into the lake alongside fields of high country flowers and grasses. The sounds of birds were everywhere, and the sweet scent of summer hung rich in the air. All this Max saw, heard, and smelled in an instant, but then his gaze was drawn to movement, to the group playing along an eddy near where the stream flowed into the lake, less than 50 yards away. He saw his children there, John, Tyler, Josh, and Kate. But wait, there was another. He gasped, trying to focus more intently. Moving towards them, he pushed up against an unseen force, as if the stone wall were still invisibly in front of him. Then it became clear. Missy! There she was, kicking her bare feet in the water. As if she heard him, Missy broke from the group and came running down the trail that ended directly in front of him. "Oh my God! Missy!" he yelled and tried to move forward through the veil that held them separate. To his consternation, he ran into a power that would not allow him to get closer, as if some magnetic force increased in direct opposition to his effort, deflecting him back into the room. "She cannot hear you." Mac didn't care. "Missy!" he screamed. She was so close. The memory that he had been trying so hard not to lose, but had felt slowly slipping away, now snapped back. He looked for some kind of handhold, as if he could pry whatever it was open and find some way to get through to his daughter. But there was nothing. Meanwhile, Missy had arrived and stood directly in front of him. Her gaze was clearly not at them, but at something that was in between, larger and obviously visible to her, but not to him. Mac finally quit fighting the force field and half turned to the woman. "Can she see me? Does she know that I'm here?" he asked desperately. "She knows that you are here, but she cannot see you. From her side, she is looking at the beautiful waterfall and nothing more. But she knows that you are behind it." "Waterfalls!" Mac exclaimed, laughing to himself. "She just can't get enough of waterfalls." Now Mac focused on her, trying to memorize again every detail of her expression and hair and hands. As he did so, Missy's face erupted in a huge smile, dimples standing out. In slow motion, with great exaggeration, he could see her mouth the words, "It's okay, I." And now she signed the words, "Love you." It was too much, and Mac wept for joy. Still he couldn't stop looking at her, watching her through his own cascading waterfall. To be this close again was painful, to see her stand in that Missy way, with one leg forward and a hand on her hip, wrist inward. She's really okay, isn't she? More than you know. This life is only the anteroom of a greater reality to come. No one reaches their potential in your world. It's only preparation for what Papa had in mind all along. Can I get to her? Maybe just one hug and a kiss, he begged quietly. No, this is the way that she wanted it. She wanted it this way? Mac was confused. Yes, she is a very wise child, our Missy. I am especially fond of her. Are you sure she knows I'm here? Yes, I'm sure, she assured Mac. She has been very excited for this day, to play with her brothers and sister and to be near you. She very much would have liked her mother to be here too, but that will wait for another time. Mac turned towards the woman. Are my other children really here? They are here, but they aren't. Only Missy is truly here. The others are dreaming, and each will have a vague memory of this, some in greater detail than others, but none fully or completely. This is a very peaceful time of sleep for each of them, except Kate. This dream will not be easy for her. Missy, though, is fully awake. Mac watched every move his precious Missy was making. Has she forgiven me? He asked. Forgiven you for what? I failed her, he whispered. It would be her nature to forgive, if there were anything to forgive, which there is not. But I didn't stop him from taking her. He took her while I wasn't paying attention. His voice trailed off. If you remember, you were saving your son. Only you, in the entire universe, believe that somehow you are to blame. Missy doesn't believe that, nor Nan, nor Papa. Perhaps it's time to let that go, that lie. And Mackenzie, even if you had been to blame, her love is much stronger than your fault could ever be. Just then someone called Missy's name, and Mac recognised the voice. She shrieked with delight and started to run back towards the others. Abruptly she stopped and ran back towards her daddy. She made a big embrace as if she were hugging him, and, with eyes closed, over-exaggerated a kiss. From behind the barrier he hugged her back. For a moment she stood completely still, as if knowing she was giving him a gift for his memory, waved, turned, and raced back to the others. And now Mac could clearly see the voice that had called his Missy. It was Jesus, playing in the middle of the children. Without hesitation, Missy leaped into his arms. He swung her around twice before putting her back on her feet, and then everyone laughed before hunting for smooth stones to skip across the surface of the lake. The voicing of their joy was a symphony to Mac's ears, and as he watched, his tears flowed freely. Suddenly, without warning, water roared down from above directly in front of him and obliterated all the sights and sounds of his children. Instinctively he jumped back. He now realised that the walls of the cave had dissolved around him, and he was standing in a grotto on the back side of the waterfall. Mac felt the woman's hand on his shoulder. "Is it over?" he asked. "For now," she replied tenderly. "Mackenzie, judgment is not about destruction, but about setting things right." Mac smiled. "I don't feel stuck anymore." She steered him gently toward the side of the waterfall until he could once again see Jesus on the shore, still skimming stones. "I think someone is waiting for you." Her hands squeezed softly and then left his shoulders, and Mac knew without looking that she was gone. After carefully climbing over slippery boulders and across wet rocks, he found a way around the edge of the falls, then through the refreshing mist of tumbling water, and back into daylight. Exhausted, but deeply fulfilled, Mac paused and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to etch the details of Missy's presence indelibly into his mind, hoping that in the days to come he would be able to bring back every moment with her, every nuance and movement. And suddenly he missed Nan so very, very much. Chapter 12. In the belly of the beasts. As Mac made his way down the trail toward the lake, he suddenly realised that something was missing. His constant companion, the great sadness, was gone. It was as if it had been washed away in the mists of the waterfall as he emerged from behind its curtain. Its absence felt odd, perhaps even uncomfortable. For the past years it had defined for him what was normal, but now unexpectedly it had vanished. Normal is a myth, he thought to himself. The great sadness would not be part of his identity any longer. He knew now that Missy wouldn't care if he refused to put it on. In fact, she wouldn't want him to huddle in that shroud, and would likely grieve for him if he did. He wondered who he would be now that he was letting all that go, to walk into each day without the guilt and despair that had sucked the colours of life out of everything. As he entered the clearing, he saw Jesus still waiting, still skimming stones. "Hey, I think my best was 13 skips," he said as he laughed and walked to meet Mac. "But Tyler beat me by 3 and Josh threw one that skipped so fast we all lost count." As they hugged, Jesus added, "You have special kids, Mac. You and Nan have loved them very well. Kate is struggling, as you know, but we're not done there." The very ease and intimacy with which Jesus talked about his children touched him deeply. "Then they're gone?" Jesus pulled back and nodded. Yes, back to their dreams, except Missy, of course. "Is she?" Mac began. "She was overjoyed to have been this close to you, and she's thrilled knowing you are better." Mac struggled to maintain his composure. Jesus understood and changed the subject. "So, how was your time with Sophia?" "Sophia! Ah, that's who she is!" exclaimed Mac. Then a perplexed look came across his face. "But doesn't that make 4 of you? Is she God too?" Jesus laughed. "No, Mac, there are only 3 of us. Sophia is a personification of Papa's wisdom." "Oh, like in Proverbs, where wisdom is pictured as a woman calling out in the streets, trying to find anyone who'll listen to her. That's her." "But," Mac paused as he bent to untie the laces of his shoes, "she seemed so real." "Oh, she's quite real," said Jesus. He then looked around to see if anyone was watching and whispered, "She's part of the mystery surrounding of Sarayu." "I love Sarayu," Mac exclaimed as he stood, somewhat surprised at his own transparency. "Me too," Jesus stated with emphasis. They walked back to the shore and silently stood looking across at the shack. "It was terrible, and it was wonderful, my time with Sophia." Mac finally answered the question Jesus had asked earlier. He suddenly realised that the sun was still high in the sky. "Exactly how long have I been gone?" "It's been less than 15 minutes, so not long," Jesus replied. At Mac's look of bewilderment, he added, "Time with Sophia is not like normal time." "Huh, I doubt if anything with her is normal." "Actually," Jesus started to speak but paused to throw one last stone. "With her, everything is normal and elegantly simple. Because you are so lost and independent, you bring to her many complications, and as a result, you find even her simplicity profound." "So, I'm complex and she's simple. Phew! My world is upside down." Mac had already sat down on a log and was taking off his shoes and socks for the walk back. "Can you tell me this? Here it is in the middle of the day, and my children were here in their dreams. How does that work? Is any of this real? Or am I just dreaming too?" Again Jesus laughed. "As far as how all this works, don't ask, Mac. It's a little heady, something to do with time-dimensional coupling. More of Sarayu stuff. Time, as you know it, presents no boundaries to the one who created it. You can ask her if you like." "No, I think I'll wait on that one. I was just curious," he chuckled. But as for, is any of this real? Far more real than you can imagine. Jesus paused for a moment to get Mac's full attention. A better question might be, what is real? I'm beginning to think that I have no idea, Mac offered. Would all this be any less real if it were inside a dream? I think I'd be disappointed. Why? Mac, there is far more going on here than you have the ability to perceive. Let me assure you, all of this is very much real, far more real than life as you've known it. Mac hesitated, but then decided to take the risk and ask. There is still one thing bothering me, about Missy. Jesus walked over and sat next to him on the log. Mac leaned over and put his elbows on his knees, staring past his hands and down at the pebbles near his feet. Finally he said, I keep thinking about her, alone in that truck, so terrified. Jesus reached over and put his hand on Mac's shoulder and squeezed. Mac, she was never alone. I never left her. We never left her, not for one instant. I could no more abandon her, or you, than I could abandon myself. Did she know you were there? Yes, Mac, she did. Not at first. The fear was overwhelming and she was in shock. It took hours to get up here from the campsite. But as Sarayu wrapped herself around her, Missy settled down. The long ride actually gave us a chance to talk. Mac was trying to take all this in. He could no longer speak. She may have been only 6 years old, but Missy and I are friends. We talk. She had no idea what was going to happen. She was actually more worried about you and the other kids, knowing that you couldn't find her. She prayed for you, for your peace. Mac wept, fresh tears rolling down his cheeks. This time he didn't mind. Jesus gently pulled him into his arms and held him. Mac, I don't think you want to know all the details. I'm sure they won't help you. But I can tell you there was not a moment that we were not with her. She knew my peace, and you would have been proud of her. She was so brave. The tears flowed freely now, but even Mac noticed this time it was different. He was no longer alone. Without embarrassment, he wept onto the shoulder of this man he had grown to love. With each sob he felt the tension drain away, replaced by a deep sense of relief. Finally, he took a deep breath and blew it out as he lifted his head. Then, without another word, he stood up, slung his shoes over one shoulder, and simply walked into the water. Although he was a little surprised when his first step found the lake bottom up to his ankles, he didn't care. He stopped, rolled up his trouser legs above the knees just to be sure, and took another step into the shocking cold water. This one took him up to mid-calf, and the next up to just below his knees, his feet still on the lake bottom. He looked back to see Jesus standing on the shore with arms folded across his chest, watching him. Mac turned and looked towards the opposite shore. He wasn't sure why it wasn't working this time, but he was determined to press on. Jesus was there, so he had nothing to worry about. The prospect of a long and cold swim was not too thrilling, but Mac was sure he could make it across if he had to. Thankfully, when he took his next step, instead of going deeper, he rose up a little, and with each succeeding stride, he came up even more until he was on top of the water once again. Jesus joined him, and they both continued walking towards the shack. This always works better when we do it together, don't you think? Jesus asked, smiling. Still more to learn, I guess. Mac returned his smile. It didn't matter to him, he realised, whether he had to swim the distance or walk on water, as wonderful as the latter was. What mattered was that Jesus was with him. Perhaps he was beginning to trust him after all, even if it were only baby steps. Thank you for being with me, for talking to me about Missy. I haven't really talked about that with anyone. It just felt so huge and terrifying. But it doesn't seem to hold the same power now. The darkness hides the true size of fears and lies and regrets, Jesus explained. The truth is, they are more shadow than reality, so they seem bigger in the dark. When the light shines into the places they live inside you, you start to see them for what they are. But why do we keep all that crap inside? Mac asked. Because it's safer there. And sometimes, when you're a kid trying to survive, it really is safer there. Then you grow up on the outside, but on the inside you're still that kid in the dark cave surrounded by monsters, and out of habit you keep adding to your collection. We all collect things we value, you know. This made Max smile. He knew Jesus was referring to something Sarayu had said about collecting tears. So how does that change, for somebody who's lost in the dark like me? Most often, pretty slowly, Jesus answered. Remember, you can't do it alone. Some folks try with all kinds of coping mechanisms and mental games, but the monsters are still there, just waiting for the chance to come out. So what do I do now? What you're already doing, Mac. Learning to live loved. It's not an easy concept for humans. You have a hard time sharing anything. So yes, what we desire is for you to return to us, and then we come and make our home inside you, and then we share. The friendship is real, not merely imagined. We're meant to experience this life, your life, together, in a dialogue, sharing the journey. You get to share in our wisdom and learn to love with our love, and we get to hear you grumble and gripe and complain, and Mac laughed out loud and pushed Jesus sideways. Stop! Jesus yelled and froze where he stood. At first Mac thought he might have offended him, but Jesus was looking intently into the water. Did you see him? Look, here he comes again. What? Mac stepped closer and shielded his eyes to try and see what it was that Jesus was looking at. Look, look, said Jesus in a hushed sort of way. He's a beauty. Must be almost 2 feet long. And then Mac saw him. A huge lake trout gliding by, only a foot or two beneath the surface, seemingly oblivious to the commotion he was causing above him. I've been trying to catch him for weeks, and here he comes just to bait me, he laughed. Mac watched, amazed, as Jesus started to dodge this way and that, trying to keep up with the fish, and finally gave up. He looked at Mac, excited as a little kid. Isn't he great? I'll probably never catch him. Mac was bewildered by the whole scene. Jesus, why don't you just command him to, jump in your boat or bite your hook? Aren't you the Lord of creation? Sure, said Jesus, leaning down and running his hand over the water. But where would be the fun in that, eh? He looked up and grinned. Mac didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He realised how much he had come to love this man who was also God. Jesus stood back up, and together they continued their meandering towards the jetty. Mac ventured another question. Can I ask, why didn't you tell me about Missy earlier? Like last night, or a year ago, or... Don't think we didn't try. Have you noticed that in your pain you assume the worst of me? I've been talking to you for a long time, but today was the first time you could hear it, and all those other times weren't a waste either. Like little cracks in the wall, one at a time, but woven together, they prepared you for today. You have to take the time to prepare the soil if you want it to embrace the seed. I'm not sure why we resist you so much, Mac mused. It seems kind of stupid now. It's all part of the timing of grace, Mac, Jesus continued. If the universe contained only one human being, timing would be rather simple. But add just one more and, well, you know the story. Each choice ripples out through time and relationships, bouncing off other choices. And out of what seems to be a huge mess, Papa weaves a magnificent tapestry. Only Papa can work all this out, and she does it with grace. So I guess all I can do is follow her, Mac concluded. Yep, that's the point. Now you're beginning to understand what it means to be truly human. They reached the end of the jetty, and Jesus leapt up onto it, turning to help Mac. Together they sat down at its end and dangled their bare feet in the water, watching the mesmerising effects of the wind on the surface of the lake. Mac was the first to break the silence. Was I seeing heaven when I was seeing Missy? It looked a lot like here. Well, Mac, our final destiny is not the picture of heaven that you have stuck in your head. You know, the image of pearly gates and streets of gold. Instead, it's a new cleansing of this universe, so it will indeed look a lot like here. Then what's with the pearly gates and gold stuff? That stuff, my brother, Jesus began, lying back on the jetty and closing his eyes against the warmth and brightness of the day, is a picture of me and the woman I'm in love with. Mac looked at him to see if he was joking, but it was obvious he wasn't. It is a picture of my bride, the church. Individuals who together form a spiritual city with a living river flowing through the middle, and on both shores trees growing with fruit that will heal the hurt and sorrows of the nations. And this city is always open, and each gate into it is made of a single pearl. He opened one eye and looked at Mac. That would be me. He saw Mac's question and explained. Pearls, Mac, the only precious stones made by pain, suffering, and, finally, death. I get it, you are the way in, but... Mac paused, searching for the right words. You're talking about the church as this woman you're in love with. I'm pretty sure I haven't met her. He turned away slightly. She's not the place I go to on Sundays. Mac said more to himself, unsure if that was safe to say out loud. Mac, that's because you're only seeing the institution, a man-made system. That's not what I came to build. What I see are people and their lives, a living, breathing community of all those who love me, not buildings and programs. Mac was a bit taken aback to hear Jesus talking about church this way, but then again it didn't really surprise him. It was a relief. So how do I become part of that church? This woman you seem to be so gaga over. It's simple, Mac. It's all about relationships and simply sharing life. What we are doing right now, just doing this, and being open and available to others around us. My church is all about people, and life is all about relationships. You can't build it. It's my job, and I'm actually pretty good at it, Jesus said with a chuckle. For Mac, these words were like a breath of fresh air. Simple. Not a bunch of exhausting work and long list of demands, and not the sitting in endless meetings staring at the backs of people's heads, people he really didn't even know. Just sharing life. But wait, Mac had a jumble of questions starting to surface. Maybe he had misunderstood. This seemed too simple. Again he caught himself. Perhaps it was because humans are so utterly lost and independent that we take what is simple and make it complex. So he thought twice about messing with what he was beginning to understand. To begin asking his jumbled mess of questions at this moment felt like throwing a dirt clod into a little pool of clear water. Never mind, was all he said. Mac, you don't need to have it all figured out. Just be with me. After a moment he decided to join Jesus, and as he lay on his back next to him, shielding his eyes from the sun in order to watch the clouds sweeping away the early afternoon. Well, to be honest, he admitted, I'm not too disappointed that the street of gold thing isn't the big prize. It always sounded a little boring to me, and not nearly as wonderful as being out here with you. Near quiet descended as Mac took in the moment. He could hear the hush of wind caressing trees and the laughter of the nearby creek as it spilled its way into the lake. The day was majestic, the take-your-breath-away surroundings incredible. I really do want to understand. I mean, I find the way you are so different from all the well-intentioned religious stuff I'm familiar with. As well-intentioned as it might be, you know that religious machinery can chew up people, Jesus said. An awful lot of what is done in my name has nothing to do with me and is often, even if unintentionally, contrary to my purposes. You're not too fond of religion and institutions, Mac said, not sure if he was asking a question or making an observation. I don't create institutions. Never have, never will. What about the institution of marriage? Marriage is not an institution, it's a relationship. Jesus paused, his voice steady and patient. Like I said, I don't create institutions. That's an occupation for those who want to play God. So no, I'm not too big on religion, Jesus said a little sarcastically, and I'm not very fond of politics or economics either. And why should I be? They are the man-made trinity of terrors that ravages the earth and deceives those I care about. What mental turmoil and anxiety does any human face that is not related to one of these three? Mac hesitated. He wasn't sure what to say. This all felt a little over his head. Noticing that Mac's eyes were glazing over, Jesus downshifted. Put simply, these terrors are tools that many use to prop up their illusions of security and control. People are afraid of uncertainty, afraid of the future. These institutions, these structures and ideologies are all a vain effort to create some sense of certainty and security where there isn't any. It's all false. Systems cannot provide you security. Only I can. Whoa, was all Mac could think. The landscape of how he, and just about everyone he knew, had sought to manage and navigate their lives was being reduced to little more than rubble. So, Mac was processing, and not really coming up with much. So, he turned it back into a question. I don't have an agenda here, Mac, just the opposite. I came to give you life to the fullest, my life. Mac was still straining to understand. The simplicity and purity of enjoying a growing friendship? Ah, got it. If you try to live this without me, without the ongoing dialogue of us sharing this journey together, it will be like trying to walk on water by yourself. You can't, and when you try, however well-intentioned, you're going to sink. Knowing full well the answer, Jesus asked, have you ever tried to save someone who was drowning? Mac's chest and muscles instinctively tightened. He didn't like remembering Josh in the canoe and the sense of panic that suddenly rushed back from the memory. It's extremely hard to rescue someone unless they are willing to trust you. Yeah, it sure is. That's all I ask of you. When you start to sink, let me rescue you. It seemed like a simple request, but Mac was used to being the lifeguard, not the one drowning. Jesus, I'm not sure I know how to. Let me show you. Just keep giving me the little bit you have, and together we'll watch it grow. Mac began to put on his socks and shoes. Sitting here with you in this moment, it don't seem that hard, but when I think about my regular life back home, I don't know how to keep it as simple as you're suggesting. I'm stuck in that same grasp for control everyone else is. Politics, economics, social systems, bills, family, commitments can all be a bit overwhelming. I don't know how to change it all. No one is asking you to, Jesus said tenderly. That is Sarayu's task, and she knows how to do it without brutalizing anyone. The whole thing is a process, not an event. All I want from you is to trust me with what little you can and grow in loving people around you with the same love I share with you. It's not your job to change them or to convince them. You are free to love without an agenda. That's what I want to learn. And you are, Jesus winked. Jesus stood up and stretched, and Mac followed. I have been told so many lies. Jesus looked at him, and then with one arm pulled him in and hugged him. I know, Mac, so have I. I just didn't believe them. Mac, the world system is what it is. Oh, sorry, I've missed a paragraph. Together they began to walk down the jetty. As they approached the shore, they slowed again. Jesus put his hand on Mac's shoulder and gently turned him until they were face to face. Mac, the world system is what it is. Institutions, systems, ideologies, and all the vain, futile efforts of humanity that go with them are everywhere, and interaction with all of it is unavoidable. But I can give you freedom to overcome any system of power in which you find yourself. be it religious, economic, social or political. You will grow in the freedom to be inside or outside all kinds of systems and to move freely between or among them. Together, you and I can be in it and not of it. But so many of the people I care about seem to be both in it and of it. Mac was thinking about his friends, church people who had expressed love to him, and his family. He knew they loved Jesus, but were also sold out to religious activity and patriotism. Mac, I love them, and you wrongly judge many of them. For those who are both in it and of it, we must find ways to love and serve them, don't you think? Remember, the people who know me are the ones who are free to live and love without any agenda. Is that what it means to be a Christian? It sounded kind of stupid as Max said it, but it was how he was trying to sum up everything in his mind. Who said anything about being a Christian? I'm not a Christian. The idea struck Mac as odd and unexpected, and he couldn't keep himself from grinning. No, I suppose you're not. They arrived at the door of the workshop. Again Jesus stopped. Those who love me come from every system that exists. They were Buddhists or Mormons, Baptists or Muslims, Democrats, Republicans, and many who don't vote or are not part of any Sunday morning or religious institution. I have followers who were murderers, and many who are self-righteous. Some are bankers and bookies, Americans and Iraqis, Jews and Palestinians. I have no desire to make them Christian, but I do want to join them in their transformation into sons and daughters of my Papa, into my brothers and sisters, into my beloved. Does that mean, Mac asked, that all roads will lead to you? Not at all, smiled Jesus as he reached for the door handle to the shop. Most roads don't lead anywhere. What it does mean is that I will travel any road to find you. He paused. Mac, I've got some things to... Oh dear, excuse me. To finish up in the workshop, so I'll catch up with you later. Okay, what do you want me to do? Whatever you want, Mac, the afternoon is yours. Jesus patted him on the shoulder and grinned. One last thing. Remember earlier when you thanked me for letting you see Missy? That was all Papa's idea. With that he turned and waved over his shoulder as he walked into the workshop. Mac knew instantly what he wanted to do and headed for the shack to see if he could find Papa. Next time, chapter 13. And there are 18 in total, so 5 more to go. Thanks for watching, folks. See you next time.